This is the Coach's Corner podcast, hosted by Cody Rourke. Sports, debates, and the unfiltered truth. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Coach's Corner podcast. This is Cody Rourke, and we're excited. We got a great show in store for you today. We're going to talk about Week 3 in the NFL and moving forward to Week 4 in the NFL. And it's been quite an opening to the season. Some expectations have been met, and some have not been met within teams around the league, including the Broncos, Patriots, Dolphins, Browns, Bengals, Cowboys, and the list goes on and on. But before we get started with today's show, I just want to thank Dollar Shave Club for being the official home care product of the Coach's Corner podcast. Go to dollarshaveclub.com right now. Order yourself a blade, some razors, and some home care products like the One Wipe Charlie's or the moisturizer for your face before you shave. That way you can avoid nicks, bumps, and razor bumps as well, and avoid that whole hassle of going through that with Dollar Shave Club today at dollarshaveclub.com. And we'd also like to thank DDP Yoga, the official home workout program of the Coach's Corner podcast. DDP Yoga helped me tremendously in my recovery from ACL surgery and has helped me since regain definition in my abs, my muscles, my arms, and my body feels great at the same time. It's a great workout, great chiropractic adjustment as well. I get to save a little bit of money on that, but not having to go see my chiropractor every month by doing DDP. Go to DDP Yoga right now and get started today. If you want to do it on the road, take it on the road with you. Coaching every single week, going out of town, in the hotel room. Download the app, DDP Yoga Now app, in your Android and Apple stores as well. Download that and have it at your fingertips wherever you go, rather than have to take the DVDs with you and trying to find a DVD player if you're on the road traveling like I am. It's great, and it's helped me a lot. So, it's good to be back here on the Coach's Corner podcast. We don't have a guest today joining us here on the show. We got a lot of NFL topics to talk about regarding the Denver Broncos and the Bengals game. And the legend of Trevor Siemian is growing, and we'll get to that in just a minute. We're going to analyze some Defensive Player of the Months around the NFL for Defensive Player of the Month in the AFC and Offensive Player of the Month in the AFC as well, both coming from the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. We're going to talk about Dez. He's hurt once again. The Cowboys are 2-1. Dak Prescott's playing well in the absence of Tony Romo. We're going to talk about that storyline for when Tony Romo returns to the gridiron to play quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, and should he. Some injuries around the league. J.J. Watt, superstar, defensive end, defensive player for the Houston Texans, has injured his back once again. We'll give you his status later on here in the show. And the Patriots are off to a surprising 3-0 start, led by the quarterback list, Tom Brady list, Jimmy Garapollo, and Jacoby Brissett, both guys who have also suffered injuries. So now a lot of question for the New England Patriots as they get ready to take on the Buffalo Bills this weekend. Who's the quarterback going to be? Is it going to be Julian Edelman, or is Jimmy Garoppolo going to be ready to go after separating his shoulder? And we're only 1 week away from Tom Brady returning to the gridiron. And as I mentioned earlier, LeGarrette Blount, Offensive Player of the Month for them. We'll talk about his performance and the Patriots' run game ever since Brady's been out, and then the lack of course ever since they've been getting hurt and dropping like flies. Tonight, on Thursday Night Football, the Dolphins take on the Bengals in a matchup between two 1-2 teams. We're going to analyze why Ryan Tannehill is struggling under Adam Gase's system and why Andy Dalton has not got off to a good start yet to the season. Very mediocre. And hasn't looked too well at all. Hasn't looked consistent. And also, we analyze who's on the bus, who's off the bus, and who is under the bus on this week's edition of the Coach's Corner podcast. So let's dive right into it. Obviously, Week 3 in the NFL saw the Denver Broncos to a 3-0 start after Trevor Siemian got off to a very great start on his third game and his first game ever on the road as a professional and as a starting quarterback. And the first half, we could pretty much sum it up as kind of inconsistent. He kind of struggled a little bit in the first half, couldn't get things going, but really turned it around in the second half for the Denver Broncos and lit the fire under them that they needed. Siemian found Emmanuel Sanders multiple times in the first half, obviously for a touchdown, 2 touchdowns in the first half as well to Emmanuel Sanders. And Siemian would go on to throw a touchdown in the third quarter to John Phillips and also to Demaryius Thomas in the fourth quarter, respectively, as well. The offense for the Denver Broncos didn't have much of running. You know, the Cincinnati Bengals defense was pretty stout in stopping the run, holding the Denver Broncos to an average 2.3 yards per carry. And the Denver Broncos offense combined between Andy Janovich, C.J. Anderson, Devontae Booker, and Trevor Siemian only combined for 52 total rush yards for the Denver Broncos in that game. And then the Denver Broncos defense played really well. Will Parks, rookie, had his first ever career interception after T.J. Ward deflected a pass late in the fourth quarter after the Broncos secured the game. Will Parks had the game-sealing interception. It was over for Cincinnati at that point, and the defense played pretty well as well after opening up the first series against Jeremy Hill and the Bengals offense, giving up 65 yards rushing in the first series that led to a Jeremy Hill touchdown. Hill would go on later in the second quarter to score another touchdown and be held to only 97 total yards after having 60-plus yards on his first series in the first 4 or 5 carries. So Denver's defense made some good adjustments, obviously, in the middle on the interior of the defensive line. Adam Gotts has struggled a little bit. Sylvester Williams has had a very mediocre start to the year and hasn't been too impressive. It's actually been a low point for the Denver Broncos. And so the players that struggled for me, in the eyes of me when I go back and watch film for the Denver Broncos against the Cincinnati Bengals, is Todd Davis and Sylvester Williams. Jared Crick, actually, surprisingly, was the guy who brought some fire and some meat and some gap integrity to the defensive line as soon as he came into the game. That helped out as well. Shane Ray and Shaquille Barrett both played very well. Shane Ray didn't get the start, but Shaquille Barrett got the start in the absence of DeMarcus Ware, who broke his form, had surgery, will be out 4 to 6 weeks. He shall return midway through the season. But his absence, obviously, it's a big impact not having DeMarcus Ware out there on the edge. But Shane Ray, in his absence, stepped up and had 3 sacks on Andy Dalton and the Bengals offensive line. Shane Ray ended up getting those sacks in the second half. As did Von Miller, got 1 sack in that game late in the fourth quarter against the Bengals. And with that sack, that is they're pretty much the NFL awarded Von Miller Defensive Player of the Month with a total of 5 sacks through 3 games. He's on pace for a pretty good season so far, I'd like to say. But, when you have the production with Von Miller on one side who's drawing double team, triple teams, you got a guy like Shane Ray who steps in one game and gets 3 sacks. It's pretty good for the Denver Broncos who pretty much hit Andy Dalton as much as they could. Cincinnati's offense has continued to struggle. We'll talk about that when we analyze their game against the Dolphins tonight on Thursday Night Football. But let's take a look at Trevor Siemian's fourth quarter. Okay, in the fourth quarter, Trevor Siemian ended up finishing 23 of 35 for 303 yards passing and 4 touchdowns on the road in his first ever road start. But the impressive thing was how he adjusted in the second half. First half, he looked pretty inconsistent, looked a little flustered a little bit, had a couple passes that should have been picked, but they weren't. He having a great and very strong second half for the Denver Broncos. In the fourth quarter alone, threw 9 of 9 passes, completed 9 for 9, 112 yards, and a 55-yard touchdown strike to Demaryius Thomas, who also didn't have a very great game up until that point. And this all comes, Emmanuel Sanders and DT both go over 100 yards. Emmanuel Sanders scored 2 touchdowns, and Demaryius Thomas had 1. John Phillips had the other receiving touchdown from Trevor Siemian. And Denver really got it going in the second half. Trevor Siemian looked very comfortable, recognized the blitz, threw against it, and made some great throws. And one thing you can say about Trevor Siemian is technically he's still a rookie. This is his first year ever playing and starting in the NFL as quarterback. Last year he was a rookie. He's in the sophomore season, didn't have any snaps. His rookie year of the NFL, besides a knee, he took a knee before half against the Pittsburgh Steelers when Denver traveled to Pittsburgh and lost. When Brock Osweiler was the quarterback, he came in and took a knee before halftime to take them there. That was the only snap he had last year in his rookie year. And then obviously he's in a sophomore season now, which technically I consider him a rookie. And he played really, really well. He exceeded my expectations. He looked much more comfortable in the second half, and I think he's developing a little more confidence as the Denver Broncos go on throughout this season. So now Denver's got a pretty tough test on the road, early game, Eastern time zone game on the road in humid Tampa Bay, taking on the Buccaneers, who continue to struggle a little bit. Jameis Winston coming off that 4-touchdown game week 1. Didn't have a really impressive week 2, but then also struggled against the Rams in week 3, and they lost after a weather delay, 37-32 to the Los Angeles Rams. They lost at home. So now the no-fly zone in the Denver defense does have a little bit of test. They played some running quarterbacks. Obviously, Andy Dalton's not a running quarterback, but he ended up running for about 40 yards on the Denver defense up the middle. So gap integrity is very important, that the ends come up and they squeeze, and the defensive tackles don't get too far upfield. But linebacker play has to improve. Todd Davis has not had a very strong showing for the Denver Broncos so far this season. I look for a guy like Zaire Anderson, who made a huge special teams play on Adam Pac-Man Jones in the game against the Cincinnati Bengals, forced a fumble. He brings the intensity. He had a very strong preseason. So if Todd Davis doesn't improve his play, I could see Zaire Anderson challenging him to get some playing time. Also Dakota Watson as well, who they originally drafted as an inside linebacker. They ended up moving to an edge rusher. He'll get some time on the field as well for the Denver Broncos. And on the injury front, defensively, Denver's fine. The secondary's good. TJ Ward suffered a little bit of a stinger against the Bengals. He should be good to go against the Buccaneers. And then obviously it's going to be an exciting matchup when you combine. You got Jameis Winston throwing the ball to Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans, guys like that. They just released Austin Seferian-Jenkins due to a DUI incident. So you're going to probably have Mike Evans matched up on Chris Harris and Vincent Jackson matched up on Aqib Talib. Or actually, I think it's going to be vice versa. I think Aqib Talib is going to match up on Mike Evans, and Vincent Jackson is going to match up against Chris Harris. And I like Denver's chance, especially with their ability to get to the run. Jameis Winston held onto the ball a little too much last week against the Rams, and it came back to haunt him and the team, and it was one of the biggest reasons why they lost. So I anticipate Denver's going to send the house towards Jameis Winston, who is Cam Newton-esque with his ability to run the ball. Jameis Winston is kind of turnover prone as well. So they've got a lot of opportunities to capitalize here, except, the thing is, Denver struggled in the past with Eastern time zone games, early games, playing in hot, humid weather. So we'll see if the Denver Broncos will come up and rise to the occasion to take on Jameis Winston and the Bucs, who are also going to be without Doug Martin, who's still dealing with that hamstring issue. So that game will be on CBS this Sunday. Denver travels to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. But yeah, Von Miller, Defensive Player of the Month. This month has 5 sacks in just a month of that, and he's had a tremendous year so far following the playoffs of last year, where he had a tremendous impact, took out Tom Brady, Cam Newton, Ben Roethlisberger, and then in the season opener took out Cam Newton again, took out Andy Dalton and Andrew Luck. He's having a great year so far. I anticipate if Von Miller keeps playing at the pace he's playing, he very well could be considered Defensive Player of the Year or Defensive MVP at the end of the year if he keeps on pace right now. But there's still more games to be played, and Denver's still got to do a little more job, got to shape up a little more things, and I think Denver can contend really well. So, moving on to the NFC, we're going to talk about Dez Bryant once again in the headlines. And no, it has nothing to do with him catching or dropping a ball like he normally does. This time, Dez Bryant is injured. Breaking news surfaced out of this week with Dez Bryant having a hairline fracture in his knee. Hopes he can play this week, but if he doesn't play, he could be out up to 3 weeks. So that means Tony Romo would be on the field and back before Dez Bryant does, which kind of brings me to my next point after I get done discussing Dez Bryant. He's had a pretty solid season, not a great season so far. Dak Prescott threw his first touchdown to Dez Bryant. But Dez Bryant's injured. No timeline yet essentially on if he'll be able to play. He's currently questionable for the game this weekend. But he has a hairline fracture in his knee, and those things can be tricky. He was fined for missing team meetings and for missing his MRI. Jason Garrett comes out and says he's just an emotional guy. The team's going to move forward and hope he can play. So, moving on to that, I want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys for a little bit. I got a lot of fans, followers, and also players of mine that I coach at the high school level who are Dallas Cowboys fans, and they're diehard Cowboys fans, but most of them were never even alive to witness them win the Super Bowl. So their argument about we got 5 Super Bowl rings is kind of irrelevant right now. I've been alive to witness all 3 of the Denver Broncos Super Bowl wins. For that, I'm excited, I'm grateful, I'm gifted, and we are never going to see the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl in the next 5 to 10 years. It ain't going to happen, okay? So drop the horse, drop the weed and boys things every week. Now let's take a look at the state of the franchise. Jerry Jones, in my opinion, I think if he starts Tony Romo, when Tony Romo is healthy enough to come back over Dak Prescott, I think he's absolutely stupid. And I'm going to tell you this, Dak Prescott's been playing really well. Dak Prescott hasn't thrown a lot of touchdowns, hasn't had really teams throwing the ball, but what Dak Prescott has done really well is manage the game. He's handed the ball off to Ezekiel Elliott and tailbacks, and they've gotten some pretty decent running going, consistent enough to win them games, to be in position. Their only loss coming against the Giants week 1, but what I'm trying to say is Dak Prescott is playing well enough right now for me to understand that Dak Prescott will be the future of that Dallas Cowboys offense and that franchise. I do not believe, however, that when Tony Romo comes back, that Tony Romo should start ahead of him. We know what Tony Romo's like. Tony Romo's old. Tony Romo is injury prone. We have seen enough of Tony Romo throwing the ball for the Dallas Cowboys. Plain and simple. He throws interceptions, too many interceptions. How many times have we seen on a national television game, or any game for that matter, where the Dallas Cowboys are either trailing or ahead? We've seen Tony Romo throw a game-changing interception or turn over the ball or get hurt. Tony Romo is very fragile. He got hurt by getting pulled down in the preseason by the Seattle Seahawks, Michael Bennett. Cliff Averill. Cliff Averill, my bad, not Michael Bennett, but Michael Bennett's making headlines of itself, saying that Colin Kaepernick should be starting over Blaine Gabbert, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Dak Prescott is playing really well. He's playing good football right now for the Dallas Cowboys. To have them at 2-1, I honestly do believe that Dak Prescott should start over Tony Romo when Tony Romo is healthy enough. Tony Romo's career, I think, is essentially done. I don't think we're going to see anything more flashy from him that we haven't already seen, and none of us are impressed. Tony Romo had the one great year where the Cowboys were winning, they were doing good things, they got to the playoffs, and guess what? Tony Romo fumbled a snap on a field goal attempt that would have won them the game. Seattle recovered it, and guess what? Seattle won, and the Dallas Cowboys have been irrelevant ever since that time right there. I'm not impressed with Tony Romo anymore. And a lot of Cowboys fans are really hoping that Dak Prescott ends up staying and starting for the Cowboys. But Jerry Jones has different plans and says that once Tony Romo is healthy, Tony Romo will step back onto the field for the Cowboys. And if I'm Dak Prescott, I'm just going to bite my tongue and I'm going to twiddle my fingers a little bit because I know it's just a matter of time. I'm going to keep that helmet right next to me. I'm going to stay warm. I'm going to stay loose because I know in just a matter of seconds, as soon as Tony Romo is back on that field against a defense that has a pass rush, Tony Romo will be down. Tony Romo will be hurt once again. And I tell you what, that will signify the end of Tony Romo playing football for the Dallas Cowboys. He may go to some team that may need it. Heck, I could see him going to Jacksonville because Jacksonville right now is completely struggling with Blake Bortles under Gus Bradley. It's not looking pretty. So Tony Romo could be donezo and could end up somewhere. Where he's going to end up, I don't know, but I don't think he's going to be a Cowboy for the rest of his career unless he decides to retire. But Dak Prescott's been playing really well. Got to actually tip my cap to the Dallas Cowboys right now for that. Dak Prescott playing really well. Ezekiel Elliott coming onto his own a little bit, kind of struggles a little bit, a little inconsistent, has some ball handling issues I think he'll take care of. But you know what? I don't think that the Dallas Cowboys are going to contend in the NFC. I don't think that one bit. I think the Packers right now are playing phenomenal. I think the Vikings right now are playing stellar football without a quarterback and without Adrian Peterson, who's probably going to be out for a while. Obviously, after losing Teddy Bridgewater, they do have Sam Bradford now, Matt Asiata. I think ideally that The Minnesota Vikings are playing well enough right now. I think they're in a good position with the kind of defense that they have to win games and to get guys healthy. Stephon Diggs is having a tremendous season in his sophomore campaign as Minnesota Vikings wide receiver. Ray Waynes in his sophomore year is having a more consistent and better year. Teams like to pick on him, but he likes to pick them off too. So we just saw the Minnesota Vikings dethrone Cam Newton and demolish him, added him to the list of people that defensives have demolished. Cam Newton struggled against the Vikings, and the Vikings ran away with that game after being down 10-0 and then eventually 10-2 after forcing a safety. Punt return special teams was huge for them. I think the Vikings are going to be okay. Vikings are obviously, I think right now, them and the Packers are my two teams that I think are going to be contenders in that league, in the NFC, in that conference. I think the Panthers will be okay. I think they might make the playoffs as a wild card. I don't. You know what? They actually might win that division because that division right now is not that good. You got the Atlanta Falcons who beat the New Orleans Saints, but the Saints aren't that good. They don't have a good defense. The Falcons don't have a good defense either. Tevin Coleman's running pretty well right now for the Falcons. Matt Ryan's playing solid enough for them to be okay in some games. Dan Quinn's defense is kind of holding on a little bit, but I think that the Carolina Panthers will still win that division. I do not think, however, that they will contend or even repeat or get to the Super Bowl. I just don't see it. The defense isn't that good this year for the Panthers, just based off after 3 weeks in the NFL. So that's going to be an interesting storyline to follow if they can get the adjustments made, if Riverboat Ron can rally the troops down there in Carolina and get them back on the board again. I just don't see it right now, but with the way that they looked and all the distractions going on. You got Cam Newton in the media apparently hanging up on the Atlanta media during the weekly conference. So there's sour grapes over there in Carolina right now, especially with Cam Newton. I think I just don't think they're going to make the Super Bowl to get there. I don't think they're going to get to the NFC Championship. I just don't see it. So yeah, moving on now. I think injuries always plague teams in the year. Obviously, we've seen so far with injuries, we've seen Teddy Bridgewater out, Adrian Peterson out, but the Vikings are 3-0. The Vikings are doing really well. They're playing really well right now. We see the Denver Broncos at 3-0. DeMarcus Ware, key injury. Donald Stevenson as well has been injured for the line for the Denver Broncos, who looks completely revamped. They obviously miss him a little bit. Rookie sophomore Tyson Brylo out of Colorado came back this past week. Looked really rusty at tackle, but could get better, could improve a little bit. But I'd say the biggest injury right now that is affecting a team will end up affecting a team the most is J.J. Watt and the Houston Texans. J.J. Watt re-injured his back that he injured and had surgery on earlier on in the offseason, and he's out indefinitely. Question is, he's probably going to be out for the rest of the season. He may return next year in 2017, but right now the outlook's not that good for J.J. Watt, who they considered out for the rest of the year. He's been put on injured reserve, and they're going to miss his impact. Jadeveon Clowney's playing well enough football right now. He's playing more like he should have been, but anytime you lose a guy with the production, the heart, and the leadership on that defense that you have in J.J. Watt, who's already missing Brian Cushing on that defense, who's got a torn MCL as well. You don't have a lot of guys out there that lead like those two guys lead. So your two best leaders are off that field. So now you got to look to Jadeveon Clowney as that lead's got to step up as well and silence the critics who label it this year as either break or bust. He's either going to have a great year or he's going to be a bust, depending on this year. So the Houston Texans are off to a 2-1 start. They beat the Bears, they beat the Chiefs, and then they got demolished 27-0 by the Jimmy Garapollo list, the Tom Brady list, New England Patriots. They had Jacoby Brissett, who came in and ran for a 27-yard touchdown, but Jacoby Brissett also injured his throwing hand there. So we've seen how injuries have kind of plagued teams, but you know what? The Pats, the Broncos, the Vikings, despite facing some injuries, are 3-0 right now. And a team that shouldn't be in the position they're in, I believe, is honestly the Arizona Cardinals. We'll talk about that a little later on, or maybe even next week we'll get to it. But right now, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we get back, we're going to analyze the Patriots 3-0 start, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, and the latest status on their injuries. When is Tom Brady going to return? And LeGarrette Blount, playing like an animal so far, close to 300 yards on the season and 4 touchdowns. He was named the NFL AFC Offensive Player of the Month. We're going to analyze Thursday Night Football between the Dolphins and the Bengals. And we're going to analyze who's on the bus, who's under the bus, and who's off the bus when we return from commercial break here on the Coach's Corner podcast.
This is iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio makes you want to move.
When you have a great melody, a song can last forever.
Instantly connected.
I love it when the beat goes.
iHeartRadio is the way I get to you.
The biggest song, the biggest artist.
All in one place.
iHeartRadio.
I'll see you there.
You've been listening to the Coach's Corner podcast on iHeartRadio and iTunes. For future episodes and archives of previous episodes of the show, go to CodyWork18.com. Alrighty, welcome back to the Coach's Corner podcast, brought to you by Dollar Shave Club and DDP Yoga as well. What a halftime show we just had for you. Pretty eventful, right? iHeartRadio, very, very grateful for them broadcasting and publishing the Coach's Corner podcast on their platform. iHeartRadio has been a tremendous success for the Coach's Corner podcast, and we are very, very grateful for iHeartRadio picking up our show and playing it to all of you who are avidly listening to it across the globe. We got listeners in Pakistan. We got listeners all across the United States. Very, very excited and very blessed to have you guys listening to the show. So thank you very much for listening to us here on the Coach's Corner podcast. If you'd ever like to be on the show, tweet me at Cody Rourke NFL and say, I want to be on the show. I want to come. I want to debate sports with you. I want to talk sports, whatever it may be. Let's do it. Let's get you on the show. I'd love to have you guys. I love my listeners. I want to do some giveaways here very shortly to give back to all those who support the podcast. We'll do something special for you here very soon. I'm working on a few very exciting things for that. So with that, let's get back to our topic. Okay, let's take a look at the New England Patriots. Now, if you go back and you reference a couple of shows I had a couple shows ago, I had Nick Ferguson on to discuss the NFL with me. I think it's about 3 or 4 episodes back of the Coach's Corner podcast. I predicted that the New England Patriots would go at least 2-2 with Tom Brady being out. However, they're off to a 3-0 start, so I have to eat some crow here. I was wrong on that. The New England Patriots have played pretty well, honestly. Without Tom Brady, the first couple of weeks we had them beating the Arizona Cardinals after the Cardinals kicker missed a field goal. Jimmy Garapollo has played really well. He's managed games. He hasn't had to do anything flashy, anything fancy. They've run the ball really well, and their defense has played pretty solid. But Jimmy Garapollo got hurt in week 2, and so that left a lot of question. Okay, who's the quarterback? Are they going to go through free agency and sign somebody? Are they going to trade for somebody with both Tom Brady and Jimmy Garapollo being injured? No, that's not what they did. They had rookie Jacoby Brissett. He ended up starting week 3 for the Patriots against the Houston Texans and led them to a 27-0 victory. Now, in the process, he tore a ligament in his throwing hand and in one of his fingers. So that is limited his status. So now, with them playing the Buffalo Bills this weekend, and a lot of question is who's going to be the quarterback. Both Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett were very limited in practice so far this week, which begs the question, is Julian Edelman going to play quarterback? And many people, some of you don't even know that Julian Edelman played quarterback at Kent State when he was in college and then transitioned to a DB and wide receiver as soon as he came to the NFL. I like to say Julian Edelman's the utility man. He can do everything. He can return kicks. He can play quarterback. He can run the ball for you. He can catch the ball for you. There's nothing he can't do. I don't know if he can kick. We haven't seen that yet, but I call him the utility man. He's a very fast, very agile player. Against the Buffalo Bills, I could see them playing him at quarterback, but I do anticipate that maybe Jimmy Garoppolo will play this week. Both quarterbacks' status is questionable. They're not bringing anybody in. Rex Ryan pulled some antics this week, posing as a reporter, and asked Julian Edelman on the conference call if he was going to be the quarterback, to no avail. Bill Belichick wasn't too happy about it. Not a big fan of Rex Ryan's tactics as well. So I anticipate that Rex Ryan's got a plan for how to counteract Bill Belichick, but it's never really worked, honestly. I honestly see the Patriots going 4-0. I don't think the Buffalo Bills are going to beat the Patriots. They're going to be without Sammy Watkins. Their defense is kind of struggling. It's teetering a little bit. Not the start that they wanted. They've given up too many points, and they fired their offensive coordinator after they put up 30-something points, but their defense allowed 30-something points. So Rex Ryan did not fire his brother Rob Ryan, who coordinates the defense, and they gave a lot of points. So I do anticipate the Patriots will start off 4-0, not the 2-2 start I envision them being at. But with that said, we're only a week away from Tom Brady's return. Week 5, Tom Brady returns to action against the Cleveland Browns. Rob Gronkowski's healthy, and they look pretty good right now. The Patriots look good without Tom Brady, so when they get Tom Brady back, I can only imagine that he'll be good. Tom Brady's been working out with Randy Moss and Wes Welker, some former wideouts of his, during his Deflategate suspension, so I anticipate that Tom Brady's standards, he's going to be just fine. And the Patriots are going to be a very tough team to beat. I anticipate them being deep in the playoffs as well. If he's playing the way they're playing, I imagine that we're going to see another AFC championship rematch between the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. But we're only in week 3. We can't predict that kind of stuff right now. But another reason why the New England Patriots have won, not just because of the solid play of their backup quarterbacks, but on the ground, LeGarrette Blount's had a tremendous start to the year. He's got 298 yards on 75 rushes and has 4 touchdowns. He is averaging 4.5 yards per carry and is named today the AFC's Offensive Player of the Month, and he's done tremendously well. He's had a couple multiple touchdown games. He's ran the ball really hard, and he's hard to bring down. He's a big guy. He's been a key piece. The New England Patriots are winning without Tom Brady, and he only adds to the overall equilibrium of why the Pats are winning. The offense is playing well. Quarterback's managing the game, running the ball well at the tailback position. Receivers are blocking. Chris Hogan's emerged as a pretty big player for the New England Patriots as well. So it adds just to the already weapon-filled offense with you got Martellus Bennett, Rob Gronkowski, Chris Hogan, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola. And when you get Tom Brady back, it's going to be pretty crazy to see that as well. So the Patriots off to a 3-0 start. I anticipate they're going to be 4-0. I think they're going to beat the Buffalo Bills this weekend. And then we're going to see Tom Brady back at the Browns. They could start off 5-0. So the Patriots haven't lost a step so far. They're going to contend in the AFC. They're going to be very tough. And speaking of the AFC East, we're going to look at Thursday Night Football. Tonight's matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinatti Bengals. Both teams are 1-2, and you can catch the game on the NFL Network, or if you have Twitter, you can watch the game live on Twitter. When the game starts, go to Moments, and then it'll have the Dolphins versus the Bengals. You click Watch Live, and you can watch the game on Twitter from your phone. So that's a pretty cool feature the NFL has done this year. Tonight, Thursday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Both 1-2 teams struggling to get something going. Now, many people, when the season started, anticipated that, you know what, Adam Gase, his system, his philosophy is a very quarterback-driven system. And then many people thought that Adam Gase would bring Ryan Tannehill to what Ryan Tannehill was believed to have been. He's going to reach his ceiling, his potential with Adam Gase. And so far, we haven't seen it. In the Dolphins' 3 games, Ryan Tannehill struggled. He's been sacked multiple times. He's fumbled the ball. He's thrown picks. He's thrown 5 touchdowns compared to 4 interceptions. They lost against Seattle. They lost against the Patriots. They almost came back against the Pats after finding themselves down pretty big after Kiko Alonso hit Jimmy Garapollo and knocked him out of the game. And then they hung on. It's unbelievable. They lost those 2 games, and then they hung on against a very depleted Cleveland Browns team that the game ended up going in overtime. Jay Ajayi ended up scoring the winning touchdown. So the Miami Dolphins don't look too good. They're off the bus, and they're under the bus as well. I haven't seen a lot out of them. Their run game hasn't been good. Kenny Stills has been a huge disappointment at the wide receiver position for Tannehill, and Tannehill hasn't played well at all either. Neither is the offensive line. Not to mention, another reason why the Dolphins aren't doing good is their defense is not doing good. And you got guys like Cameron Wake, you got Ndamukong Suh rushing the pass, yet they still give up 147 yards a game rushing. So that's not good. But on the other hand, the Cincinnati Bengals have struggled to run the ball. They haven't averaged over really anything. They've averaged 50 yards rushing per game. They got over 100 yesterday when Jeremy Hill had 97 yards total rushing after breaking off a 50-plus yard run on the first series against the Denver Broncos. But the Denver defense held them into check after that. And they've averaged 50 yards rushing per game. And it's not going to be easy going up against those two guys, but maybe it'll balance it out. The Dolphins have allowed over 147 yards rushing per game by the opposing teams, and the Bengals have not been able to run the ball. So which one's going to take forward? Is the Dolphins defense going to hold still and stop the run, or are the Bengals going to have a game where they just run all over a terrible defense in the Miami Dolphins? The Miami Dolphins have not looked good at all. So Andy Dalton, the other quarterback in this situation for the Cincinnati Bengals, has had a quiet year. He's thrown 2 touchdowns and picks and was held without a touchdown last week at all. The Denver defense held him to 0 touchdowns in the air and also forced an interception off of him. So when you look at the two teams, you can look at the Cincinnati Bengals, for example, and you can gain an understanding as why they are 1-2. They've played a pretty difficult schedule so far. As of late, they've played the Denver Broncos, they played the New York Jets, and they've just struggled to beat those teams. And they've played the Steelers as well, and they lost against the Steelers. So when you look at it, their only win coming off of the New York Jets on the road, week 1, lost to the Steelers week 2, lost week 3. It wasn't even close. You got to wonder, are they going to get back on track on Thursday Night Football tonight on NFL Network and on Twitter? So when we look at it, Andy Dalton's missed a couple of targets. He's only thrown to A.J. Green, really has been his primary target. They missed Marvin Jones, who had a spectacular game for the Detroit Lions, over 200 yards receiving, and Mohamed Sanu, who's kind of had a semi-formal role with the Atlanta Falcons, hasn't done too well, and he hasn't had a tight end. Tyler Eifert still recovering from ankle surgery from an injury he suffered in the Pro Bowl, but he's listed as doubtful. And the Bengals, like I said, they're only averaging 3.7 yards per carry in 3 weeks, so it hasn't been going too well for them. The Dolphins, on the other hand, are not really a complete team. Ndamukong Suh and Cameron Wake are the strong points for them. Suh's had 2.5 sacks. He's got to the quarterback, and Cameron Wake had a very big game against the Cleveland Browns. He strip-sacked Cleveland Browns' third-string quarterback, Cody Kessler, and had another one that was called back by a penalty. They lead the league with sacks allowed. The Bengals have given up too many sacks. They've given up 12 sacks in just 3 games. And Miami's pass rush hasn't done anything. They haven't really stopped the run at all. Jeremy Hill, I expect him and Giovanni Bernard to have a pretty good game against his team. One guy I think that's going to be pivotal in stopping the run is Kiko Alonso, who's had a pretty solid year. But Miami's been completely inconsistent, and so has the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's all about a question on who's going to get going. Obviously, for the Miami Dolphins, the run game, you got to look at guys like Kenyon Drake, you got Isaiah P., Damian Williams, and Jay Ajayi, all guys. So they're pretty much running with a 4 running back rotation right now. Arian Foster has a groin injury and is not going to play. When you just look at all of that, I honestly believe that this team is off the bus. They're going to be very mediocre, and this is not going to help Adam Gase in his quest as a first-year head coach for the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins want to win. They want to contend. They want to be able to compete against the New England Patriots, and I don't think it's going to happen. Not this year, unfortunately for them. But I do believe that this game will tell us, obviously, where the Cincinnati Bengals are. I think the Cincinnati Bengals have had a pretty tough schedule to start. The Jets kind of average, in my opinion, right now. but obviously the Steelers, who came off a 34-3 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know how to read that. I really don't know how to read the AFC North right now when you got the Ravens also 3-0 atop of the division. It just doesn't make sense right now. I don't know how to really decipher it. The Bengals are a good team. They get Vontaze Burfict back, so I think that makes a huge difference for the Cincinnati Bengals defense, who has Patrick Jones, who has Vontaze Burfict back today, who they didn't have against the Broncos, the Steelers, or the Jets, and I think that could be a difference maker. He's a great player. Obviously, he costs them a lot of penalties, a lot of yardage in and of itself from time to time. So that game will kick off tonight, Thursday Night Football. The Miami Dolphins take on the Cincinnati Bengals. Both teams 1-2, looking to be 2-2 and get at about 500 on the season. Will Andy Dalton get shipwright? Will A.J. Green score a touchdown finally and win me some fantasy football points? I doubt it. I haven't done it yet. I'm 1-2 in my fantasy football leagues, all due in part to Andy Dalton and A.J. Green at times.